And that is the rising threat of North Korea. The Hermit Kingdom promising to deliver new, quote, gift packages to the United States after receiving strong condemnation following this weekend's nuclear test. The world is on high alert over this threat. While meeting with South Korean President Moon Jae-in, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that while he does not accept the nuclear status of the North, it is clear that it is impossible to solve the problem with only sanctions and pressure, and that we should not give way to emotions and drive North Korea into a corner. The White House reiterated all options remain on the table.
The priority of the administration is to have denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and it's also to protect American citizens. We're looking at putting aggressive measures both diplomatically, economically, and as we've said, all options are on the table, and we're going to continue to push for a safer and denuclearized Korean Peninsula, and that's the priority here.
Joining us right now is the former commander of the U.S.S. Cole, Kirk S. Lippold. Commander, good to see you this morning. Thanks for joining us. What's the answer here? Your thoughts on North Korea?
Well, I think the answer is still going to reside solely with China. China is the one who has aided and abetted this program to get to the point where it is today. I think, as President Putin said, we are reaching a point where now he is understanding the gravity of how serious it is that North Korea is now reaching a tipping point with technology and capability that the United States and others in the region cannot tolerate, and we have to turn, and China has got to be the one that is going to step up if they want to be a leader on the world stage.
But Commander Cheryl Casoni, we've got 28,500 U.S. military personnel right now in South Korea. Isn't the key from a military standpoint our relationship with South Korea? Because China doesn't seem to want to come to the table in any real fashion.
Why should China come to the table right now? Nothing's been done to them. No screws have been applied. We haven't put any sanctions where they truly belong, and that would be aimed at China, where we specifically target their government, their military, and their industries that have aided and abetted the North Korean program. Once we start looking at China, then we were going to begin to push to get resolution to this. Obviously, sanctions on North Korea, and President Putin has looked at it and agreed, have done nothing to slow this program down.
Yeah, Commander, it's Kevin Kelly, and I think one of the things we need to highlight is you mentioned attacking sanctions that will impact the North Korean military, and one of those would be an oil embargo. One of the things that China keeps sending on over is oil. So is this just getting back to where we actually have to sit down and solve a broader tension that's happening, and that's with the South China Sea, because the Chinese aren't going to want to make concessions there, especially with the Japanese even talking about revoking their appeasement Article 9 in their constitution, where they're saying we won't use force to settle international disputes. Now they're talking about revoking that given what's happening there. So isn't this just a real big, broader discussion about sanctions and about the region?
Well, to go back to your point, Kevin, and also to Cheryl's, I believe that this issue is two-pronged. One, we're going to continue to build up with our allies in South Korea and Japan a military option that is going to give us the capability to react if we have to. In the meantime, I think there is still lots of room for diplomacy and economic forces to work on this in order to allow China to be put in the position where they're going to do it. Let's face it, North Korea is their sole military ally. They have bled and died for the sake of this country, so they're not going to give it up quickly and easily. By the same token, President Xi knows when he is on the cusp of another 5-year term, he wants to keep some degree of stability till he can get to the point where he is reelected. Once he's at that point, then he's going to have the flexibility, so to speak, of being able to now push that issue forward. And he knows that he knows that China, to be a world leader, is going to have to resolve this issue. And ultimately, the United States cannot afford the offensive threat of nuclear weapons against our nation. Yeah. Our national interests are going to come first there.
I understand that, but what do you do to China? I mean, you know, yesterday we had on Gordon Chang on this program, who's really a China expert, and he said, let's look at the financial services sector in China. Put sanctions on things like the Bank of China. Doesn't that disrupt the U.S. economy as well?
It will. But, Maria, what is the threat to the U.S. economy going to be if you have a nuclear North Korea who now uses blackmail to threaten us.
Yeah, that's a good point. How do you see it?
Yeah, Commander Don Peebles, one of the things that President Putin indicated is that he thought that sanctions at this point in time would not be effective and not be effective in the ultimate goal. So what's the pathway from your perspective if we were to impose sanctions against, say, China? And what would be the ultimate goal to accomplish? And how long do you see that taking?
Great question. I think the ultimate goal is to make China realize that the United States is very serious about this, that our bottom line, while they state it as a priority right now, the bottom line has to be the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And we are not going to trade the demilitarization of South Korea for the denuclearization of North Korea so that China can build the buffer state. I know that want that, but in some ways we have to make China realize that we're serious about this threat, that the sanctions that we're going to put in place are going to begin to impact them, and while it may affect our economy, or better yet, will affect our economy, better to have that start happening up front now, because when you have a North Korea that may detonate a nuclear weapon, whether it is going to be on South Korea, Japan, Guam, Hawaii, we cannot trade our national security interests for any other ally. It is a harsh reality, but at the end of the day, when you look at Putin, the sanctions I think he was talking about was North Korea. When you're looking at the fact that we're going to now start looking at China and saying, we have no choice but to force your hand in this, that's what's going to make them realize that they're going to have to make North Korea step back from this brink, because otherwise we are headed to war.
We'll be watching this. Commander, good to have you on the program this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Commander Kirk S. Lippold joining us there. We'll take a